We got to hype everyone up before we give our presentation. And that's where we're at so far. But with this video, we really want to get across the impact. And here we go. All right. So again, my name's Jared Jacobs. I'm on the board with the Love The Everglades Movement. And with me is Dr. Lanette Sobel, who leads the Fertile Earth Worm Farm. And we are the two vendors that are working directly with Isla Mirada, who won the most recent grant for composting. So what is the grant? So Love the Everglades. Sorry, go ahead.
Village of Pinecrest.
Village of Pinecrest. So Love the Everglades is involved because we believe composting is a cycle back into who we are. So the water cycle is very easy to comprehend, right? People get it. Water evaporates, it comes back down, it goes in a cycle. But carbon is the same way, and we are carbon. So how do we create that cultural shift? How do we create that behavior change? By building that bridge and identifying ourselves as carbon, we believe we'll achieve that goal. So here's a little bit about the agenda, what we're going to go over. And this is the grant that we won. It's called the Composting and Food Waste Reduction by the USDA. It was about 400K it was 400K with 100K in match. And the reason we won is because of our strong relationships. Partnerships is what got us to achieve this grant. So what is it funding? The composting operation is the bulk of it. What are we going to actually physically do? Education and outreach is also a big part of it because, as we all know, the behavior change is not going to be an easy step. Program expansion, how are we going to sustain ourselves? The program's only 2 years old, so how are we going to maintain our operations past those 2 years? And then a demonstration site to show the best case example. So this is our mission. We want to show that we are one Everglades, right? Even though we're in the city, even though Pinecrest is on the border of the Biscayne Bay, it's still within the Everglades watershed. So by seeing ourselves as one Everglades and keeping that within the watershed, that's a big deal. If we burn it in an incinerator, it's not going to maintain within our cycle. If we ship it in if we haul it up north past Lake Okeechobee for landfills, it's not a part of our cycle. Every time a truckload of waste gets shipped out of our county, out of our cycle, out of our watershed, that's resources being lost. So how do we recover that? These are a few of our municipal partners that we already have. We're working with Miccosukee Tribe of Indians, Miami-Dade County District 7, the public library system, and a few others. The Village of Pinecrest is our primary. And hopefully your guys' municipality as well. Here's a few of our ag partners. And we'll go into a little more detail about how we're working with all these people and all these different organizations in a bit. And then a few of our garden partners for the demonstration project. And education is going to be a big part. So before we get into what we're actually going to be doing, education and building that behavior change is the most difficult part. So how we're going to do that? That's where Love the Everglades movement is going to spend the bulk of their time. And we're going to physically try and meet people where they are. What is the composting process? How are we a part of that? And then all the different locations where we plan to demonstrate and show what the program is, like assisted living facilities, different municipal events, schools, community centers, etc. So this is our assumption. Now we're getting into the why. And before we show the what, the why, we believe that healthier choices assumption is the key, the switch to creating that behavior change. If you're in a room full of people and you ask a bunch of kids like, "Hey, would you rather go to Charlie's Chocolate Factory or would you rather go to a food forest with all your favorite fruit?" 9 times out of 10, the kids are going to choose the fruit. It's just it's an instinct. It's part of our natural human behavior to choose to make the healthier choice. So that's what the base of our grant was built off of. And then our central theme is what is a circular economy? So there's many definitions. This is the definition that we're going off of. And so we believe that a circular economy is supporting that choice, supporting healthy options for people to have self-determination, for people to make their own decisions. Historically, the word economy meant a well-managed home before, the concept of GDP was developed, before the Chicago economics destroyed the planet. So what is our regional economic impact? After we go through the numbers and base all of our results off of diverting 390,000 cubic yards of organic material, which will cost around 500K, this is the total economic impact that we're predicting. We'll be able to cycle regionally within the Everglades watershed. So with $500,000 being invested into composting, we'll be cycling over $8 million worth of impact back into our regional Everglades. And again, we'll go deeper into detail on how later. So I'm going to leave it on this page for a second, but something that we want to make very clear is municipal and residential composting has a very small impact. That's not where the bulk of it is. Commercial composting is really where the bulk of diversion is can be impactful. So our strategy is to work through the municipalities, to work through the homeowners, to find the people who care, to find the children who care, and build that behavior change at that level. There's nothing more impactful than a kid going home and saying, Mommy, I want to learn how to compost. I want to do this. So if we start there and build our way up, then people will take that with them to their place of business. So by starting at that very small personal level, that very human level, then we'll be able to expand and reach the commercial composting or commercial clients, if you will. And what this means is Miami's unique. It has its own culture. So we have to find our own unique way to build these cultural norms. Miami is very transient. There's not many people that call this place home, right? Which is why it's difficult to get people to compost, to recycle, to care about our watershed. Yet also at the same time, Miami is a very transient place. We have people from all over the world. And something that we have realized by working with different companies, different municipalities, different just people, uh, where people are coming from, composting is normal. It's just, it really is the default way of living. And when they move to Miami, they have to forget a behavior that's already healthy. So by implementing this program, we're really banking on people just continuing to re-establish their existing positive behaviors. So what are our goals? This was very important when we were putting this grant together to define what our actual goals were. And our goals are very high level, right? Like what is the hierarchy of our intention. So redefine waste. There's no such thing as waste. This is all organic material, resource recovery, enhancing the health of our soil, supporting farmers. Farmers are really the front line of the urban development boundary, mitigating ocean acidification and algae blooms. You'll see later how our strategy helps to prevent fertilizers and pesticides, and then economic development, how we're going to sustain this model. So we dig in a little deeper. What are our objectives? Primary objective is reduce municipal waste. Let's divert as much as we can away from landfills. Climate action. Landfills suck. They produce methane. Incinerators are bad too. So let's show the data. This goes beyond just the action. This is the actual data. Education and outreach. Let's start with the kids, work our way up. Civic engagement. We believe we want to base this model similar to how Freebie expanded, going municipality to municipality and supporting like local smaller governments. And then our financial model. Implementation. So we're going to go through 3 different stages. What is it? So you've heard a lot of fluff. What is it actually funding? This is funding 7 new community compost collection sites where we're going to be removing the organic material. And then we're going to be throwing a charrette / fundraiser event at the Pinecrest Gardens. And this is where we're going to be needing some help. Stage 2 will be really implementing the behavior changes, going door to door, talking to the local businesses, going to the assisted living facilities, and then also the creation of a demonstration site. The demonstration site is going to be physically at the Miccosukee village. And so we can show and demonstrate how we don't even need to haul material off of the properties with the proper behavior and the proper patterns. Everything is self-sustaining. And then our stage 3 is this is the gold. What are we actually doing with our compost? Why is this the circular economy program? Because with the material that we're collecting, we're going to be giving some of it directly to the Miccosukee, which is, think of the watershed as a hill. They're almost at the top, right? Everything flows down. So by returning material to the top of the watershed, kind of the middle, then we're help them restore their tree islands or whatever it is that their goals are. And then the rest of it, we're going to be sharing with local organic farmers and returning back to the municipalities that are a part of the program. And what we mean by that is like parks, the libraries, whatever municipal project that they have where they need soil, compost, or gardening. And then data. We want to quantify as much as we can so we can adapt and repeat. So I just want to make that clear here. The main goal of our grant when it comes to the physical application is returning material to local farmers in the Miccosukee. Just to reiterate, we have our collection areas. Then we are going to process it and enhance it with more material. Then we're diversion of the highest use. What does that mean? The EPA has a hierarchy of how material should be diverted, starting with humans, then animals, and then we can get into composting. And then our implementation partner, the Fertile Earth Worm Farm, Lanette Sobel here will dig in a little more on how the Fertile Earth Worm Farm will be collecting and processing all of the organic material.
Thanks, Jared. So we are excited because actually in January, we became officially compliant. We're the only composter in Miami-Dade County that actually complies with everything Miami-Dade County wants. And this is the first time we've gotten such a let's put it this way. It's been a long road to get where we are. It's been 16 years in the making. It's been a lot of back and forth. It's been a lot of like working with Durham during this process. Another composter got shut down. And so there's the system that we have in Miami-Dade is definitely not designed to encourage composting and commercial composting specifically. And we're here to try and change that because we already know that incinerators are bad. They're bad for the environment. They're bad for human health. We know that landfills are bad for human environment, bad for human health. I don't really understand why we need more pilots or more studies or more consultants on board to tell us that again, because I think there's plenty of evidence that these things aren't optimal. But everything that I think that we can agree on is that food has no business being in the landfill and has no business being in an incinerator. It's the food that causes the methane gas. It's the food that contributes to the leachate. And it's also silly to burn wet food in an incinerator. It requires the most energy. So, and instead, this is a resource. And to remember where we're at specifically is that we're in South Florida. We have no soil. If you've ever dug into your backyard, most likely you hit rock after a very, very small, like organic layer. Like we're built on coral rock. For most places, our farm is actually an exception to the rule. A river used to run through our farm, so we actually have feet and feet of marl. So it's a little different, but this has one of the biggest agricultural industries in the country, and we import soil. We import peat moss from Lithuania and from Canada, and we import all these ingredients when we have all these resources that instead we're wasting by landfilling or incinerating. So that's what we want to change. We want to change this paradigm. This paradigm shift needs to change. This linear system of take, make, waste isn't working. And I have a child, and hopefully she will have children, and I want to leave them a better place than how we found it. So the intention is to go back to what Mother Nature intended. So it's a circle, and there's no such thing as waste. There's even whole cultures, languages that don't have a word for waste because there's no such thing as it. What's considered waste in one cycle is just a resource for another. And so we want to get back to that and to reminding and our municipalities especially about that simple concept and our obligation to have a healthy world for our children. So that's what we're trying to do. So sorry, I'm doing this on my phone, but yes, so we have this, we are part of this SDG goal 16. And we are committed to improving and promoting composting and that and doing it in a way that is obviously not only sustainable but sustainable financially as well, and also good for the people, and that we do it in a way that doesn't harm the environment. I know that that's been a issue that Miami-Dade County has repeatedly said that they're concerned about composting affecting negatively the environment. And that's why, in my opinion, all of us composters are here to improve the environment, not to denigrate it. But there are things that us composters need to be aware of. There are things that we can't, I personally believe we shouldn't compost. We do need to test our final product, like with third-party laboratories or our own. We do bioassays at our farm, which just means that we take very sensitive seeds and we plant it in the compost so that we know that soil can support growth, because there are like chemicals in our system, such as persistent herbicides, that will absolutely decimate everything. And so there definitely are concerns, but this is everything, every single concern can be addressed. And we want to make sure that we're really like good stewards of the earth and like in every single possible way. So here we have a little bit about us and our capacity. So we have our own farm and we have our partner's farm, and that by itself is 17 plus acres. And then in addition, we have a network of farmers that we work with. And so in total, we have about 40 plus acres of land, and we can process 44,000 yards of raw material. And we can absolutely quadruple what we're taking. So the top picture on the right is our worm farming operation. These are called CFT beds. They're probably, I call them the Rolls Royce of worm farming, because these are amazing. Like you feed them from the top, and there's a cutting bar and a motor at the bottom that slices the finished castings from the bottom, and then from there we will make that into a tea called worm tea, and that's a natural pest repellent and a fertilizer. And it also promotes fruiting and flowering. And the bottom is a picture from our farm, and that's us building what's called windrows. So it's just one type of composting. It's a type of composting where you increase the temperature to a certain degree. We don't do it. It's all the microbes that do it. And it's just a natural, nature does the work. Like we don't really do anything. Like I consider myself a micro farmer, because my employees are the microbes, because they literally do everything. We just help them along a little bit.
And something I wanted to add in here. One of the reasons that I jumped on board and why I love this program so much is I come from a transit planning background. I hate gray field. I hate gray space. Pouring concrete and asphalt as part of solutions is just not a solution in my mind. So let's mitigate that. And Lanette's strategy decentralizes um resource recovery. And I struggled there because I wanted to say waste recover or like, diverting waste, but yet there is no such thing as waste. So what this program really is doing is decentralizing how we manage our carbon, how we manage our food scraps. And we have an entire network of farmers. There's so many farmers in South Florida. So how do we activate our farmers instead of pouring more concrete to build new facilities, right? Rather it's for an incinerator or composting. We shouldn't have to pour more concrete. Let's use what we have.
Absolutely. So there's a question that came in the chat if any composters divert food to animals, and that's actually what we do. So to touch on that just really quickly, our objective is to send food to the highest and best use and to avoid incineration and landfilling. And to do that, we first feed people if we can, then we feed animals, and then we turn it to compost. So we feed about 600 chickens per week. And then there's certain shipments that we get from food distributors that a lot of times is mostly edible, if not completely edible. Maybe 95% is totally fine to eat, except that it might be too ripe to ship. So it won't last on a truck and then sit on a shelf for a week, but it's perfectly fine to eat. So we get these shipments from food distributors all the time, 20 tons of papaya. We just recently got 2 shipments of 200 tons of onions. We get beautiful stuff like rambutans and longans and all sorts of stuff that you pay a lot of money for the store, but that comes to us. And so we definitely absolutely do our best to send as much of it to feed people when we can.
And
So
I do want to say that 8.5 million economic return that we did was before the price of eggs skyrocketed. So it's probably a lot higher now.
yes. So to talk a little bit about like what we're doing, how we're doing, it all to me it starts with education. Like we have to educate and we have to get people to understand why should they care. So when I do presentations, I usually start with how does a landfill work? Because that wasn't something I was taught in school. And out of the thousands of people that I've done presentations or workshops for, I think two maybe knew how a landfill worked. So without knowing these things, I think it's really hard to change behavior. So absolutely, absolutely, education is the key, in my opinion, to all of this. So compost literacy, getting people to understand what the issue is and why should they care, and why should they change their behavior that they've been doing a certain way for so many years. Like, what's why, the why of it, and then we're going to be hand holding every partner. So by onboarding them personally, training the staff, doing a teach the teacher like workshops, and so that's again it comes down to education, and that's what really helps us make sure that we don't have contamination. And of course, we're handling the hauling. So we have specialized trucks that are made to handle food. That's a picture of one of our trucks there, and food is a different. It's a very interesting material to handle. It's very heavy and it's very wet. And so there's special seals and gaskets on this thing. There's extra power that's being sent to the hydraulic system to lift up these heavy toters, because one of those toters can weigh up to 600 pounds. So there's a lot involved in that, but we've got that down pat. And then of course, then the last part is composting. And we're doing composting in several different ways. Like right there is another picture of like our windrows at the farm. But we are like also utilizing aerated static piles at our partner's farm. We'll be putting one in at our farm as well. And of course, we do the worm farming. And so some of the food comes to our farm and where we turn it into compost. And then some of the food goes to our partner's farm where it gets fed to the earthworms. And this is like very, people get people either get disgusted or excited by earthworms. And we invite people to come to the farm and just check out this operation and put their hands across these beds, and you'll just see thousands of earthworms like moving. And what people don't really, I guess, a lot of times know, or they don't really compute, is just how much these guys can really do. And so these beds, and we have actually the largest collection of these CFT beds in the country. Um, they can process 480 yards of fresh material every week. So if you know anything about how much that is, it's an immense quantity of material that these guys can actually eat through. So, and the second one is just a picture of our trommel screen. What we do is there's, like I mentioned before, there's a cutting bar in the bottom of these beds. So we feed from the top, and then the castings, which is just a fancy name for worm poop, gets deposited at the bottom of the beds. And so after 5 months, you're able to harvest these beds weekly. So this cutting bar cuts a slice off in the bottom, we capture it, and then we'll put it through a trommel screen and take out any like larger pieces and make sure it's, good quality and whatnot. And then it goes into the next process. So either we make soil blends out of it, or we'll actually sell the castings on its own, or what we do is the majority of the time is we make the tea. So here we have the garden beds. We have a raised garden mix bed that we use. And again, we're trying to use all local material. A lot of times in gardening and in like nursery operations, they use peat, which is very unsustainable. It takes millions of years to form. And we don't need to use any of that. Like our compost is it can actually grow 100%. Plants can grow 100% in our compost without amendments, but we do put some amendments in there to make it even pop even more. So the second picture is of one of the worm brewing tanks, the worm tea brewing tanks. We have the capacity to brew 1,700 gallons a day, and we also have the equipment to spray that, like on nurseries and in residents. And then the other part of this whole process is teaching people that they can rely on themselves. Like you don't need a company like mine or any other composting company to do this for you. Like when I started composting, I didn't have a backyard. I didn't have a balcony, but I had room underneath my kitchen sink. So through like a very interesting, I don't know, path, I ended up finding earthworms. And I had a couple thousand earthworms living underneath my kitchen sink, and nobody knew about it unless I showed you. And they process all my organic matter. And so that's what we're trying to do for the Miccosukee as well, like teach them how to compost on their own at their own site without the need for somebody like us.
And then I'll jump in here. So Miami-Dade County is one of the highest grossing agricultural community counties in the entire country. And you think, whoa, that's crazy. We have a big city, but also we have year-round agriculture. We don't have a winter season. So these farms are producing, they're producing, they're producing. And so what does that mean economically? We want to support the talents we already have. We're not going to be the next Silicon Valley. We're not going to be the next LA, but we do have unique aspects of Miami, and we will be the next Miami. So how do we dig in to our own culture, to our own way of life, drink a colada, and start supporting our farmers? And I feel like that's how we reach our economic succession. So our program will support talent retention, keeping people local. And she kind of went into this already, so we'll skip this, but go ahead. Back to Lanette.
So the other thing too that we've heard come up a lot with the county is the concern with heavy metals, specifically arsenic, specifically in sargassum. There's also some, concerns with PFAS, which is is definitely a concern. So one thing that we just want to point out is nature is amazing. Like nature is so cool. Nature has already come up with all these solutions. All we have to do is implement them. And for instance, like composting is actually a way to bioremediate contaminated soil. So, and earthworms are specifically like part of this process as well. So there are,
Lanette, you muffled.
sorry. So yeah, so earthworms are part of this process. And so this whole composting process, we can actually sequester, which means capture these heavy metals such as arsenic and trap it so it doesn't actually get into our bodies. And earthworms in general, they're not necessarily considered native to our environment, but they're absolutely naturalized and they don't cause a an issue in terms of invasiveness. It's 100% safe. And it happens to create the most valuable organic fertilizers known to man.
So I want to, that's the second time we use the term naturalized. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. We're not talking about like immigration. We're talking about from an ecological standpoint. Any species that's not native has a choice, not a choice, but does a thing. It's either invasive exotic and it outcompetes everything, it gets outcompeted itself and dies off, or it naturalizes and it creates value to the species around it. So when we say naturalized, that's what we're saying is these worms actually create a value. And so they're not an invasive exotic. They're just an exotic. They're a naturalized exotic. They actually create value to all the other life around them. And these are not the worms you get at a fishing store. That's the first thing I learned when I met Lanette like 12 years ago. All right, this is the fun part.
Go ahead. Do you want to do this one?
No, no, you start. I'll dig in when we get to the numbers.
Okay. Well, in all honesty, I guess, Jared, you already went through this because you talked about the carbon cycle. And so this is just how nature invented what to do. Like we all turn to stardust. So composting is just the when you do it, when you do it correctly, which, well, I guess, yes, correctly, let's put it correctly. Like all we're doing is cycling carbon. So we're capturing the carbon and it's just going into a soil form that plants can integrate into their own bodies, and then we eat it and it becomes part of our body, and then we poop it out or we die and then it goes back into the soil. And that in essence is a carbon cycle, and that releases almost zero methane, which is obviously one of the greenhouse gases we're most concerned with.
Yeah, because we have an opportunity. If we do stop this incinerator, I'm not going to say that's a win. I'm going to say that's an opportunity because that gives us our own determination back. That gives us an opportunity to do better. An incinerator, it's just less bad than a landfill. It's still bad. So let's take this as an opportunity. Let's take this as a win and, start recycling, start composting. And we're going to show you what it actually does. So this is based off of the pilot program that we have at the Village of Pinecrest. This is one community collection site, right? This is one place at the library. And it has diverted, where's the number? We'll get there in the next slide. But yeah, I'm just going to go to the next slide. So here's an example. So with that one thing, we're estimating, and if we multiply that by 7, so with 7, so this is now 8, sorry, with 8 community collection sites, we are estimating that we'll be able to divert 390,000 cubic yards. And this is municipal / residential compost. This isn't even the big numbers. This is still small numbers. This is all home food scraps, etc. So let's compare. Keep in mind, I used to work with Freebie. So let's compare well, I still do. Sorry, not used to. Still do. I still do finding. Let's compare a brand new electric bus to a composting plan. All right. And we're going to dig into the numbers. So with an electric bus, what it moves down to is you'll be essentially removing 40 cars off the road annually, which is awesome, by the way. And there's lots of other things that go into that, like bringing people together and shrinking land use, etc. But that's removing about 48 metric tons of CO2. And that does not include the life cycle assessment of the bus creation, which sucks. All right, now let's compare that to a composting plan. That's 619 cars off the road annually in 1 year. All right, and that's also not including the life cycle assessment, which is regenerative, which means each year this number increases and increases and increases and increases. So composting is regenerative. It's not just less bad. All right. And that's just greenhouse gases. This Lanette could talk on this a little more, but this part is just blows my mind. And how we got a lot of our numbers to reach that 8.5 million. But Lanette, could you talk about how worm tea mitigates the use of pesticide and fertilizer?
Absolutely. So when I was in grad school, I remember I was in my environmental nutrient management class, and we had to calculate fertilizer applications for pasture land or whatever, farming application we had to calculate it for. And we always had to calculate a 40% runoff of fertilizer. That was without a rain event. If there was a rain event, we increased it to 80%. So right there, it's incredible how much of this fertilizer, this chemical fertilizer, is just running off, and it's going to run off. And we know it's running off, and we're expecting it to run off because what happens is that these fertilizers are soluble. They're not meant to stay in the soil. They're meant for like a plant root to quickly absorb it, but a lot of it doesn't get absorbed. So that's the opposite of what happens in an organic situation. It's the nitrogen is actually insoluble. It's actually, there's a lot of nutrients actually that are in the soil, but the plant can't access it without having these microbial relationships. So if you've ever heard of mycorrhizae, that's a type of fungi that a plant can actually send signals out in the soil saying, hey, I need some of this. And the mycorrhizae will fetch it for the plant. So plants have developed these really interesting relationships, these symbiotic relationships with microbes, with microorganisms in general, and that's the way that nature works. So the thing that I love about the worm tea is that it is a natural fertilizer, and um, and it actually has phytohormones in it that promote fruiting and flowering. But the thing that I find the coolest is that it's actually also a pest repellent because in Mother Nature, it's a soil food web. There's always something that eats something else. Like things are in balance. There's a nematode that eats a bacteria. There's a bacteria that eats a microarthropod. There's a microarthropod that eats a protozoa. There's a fungi that eats the nematode. It's all this food web. And applying these microbial soups just injects these systems with beneficial microbes that bring balance to the plant. So we don't call it a pesticide because we're not killing anything. We're really truly just bringing balance back to the plant. But this works as this is effective on every single type of plant. It's effective on basically every single type of imbalance. So it works with caterpillars, it works with aphids, it works with fungi, it works with bacteria, it works with everything. It's a totally different way of applying agriculture. And this is something that ancestrally we've done. Like we have been doing tea extracts, compost tea extracts. We've been doing brews of tea forever, for thousands of years, and we just forgot. So this stuff to me is amazing, and this will really really help improve the water quality. When I went to grad school, before I went to grad school, I never heard about the seagrass beds dying, and when I came back, I'm like, what's going on? And a lot of this, unfortunately, has to do with agriculture. So part of my mission is to really help educate farmers that not only are they able to produce what they want to produce, but they're able to do it in a much healthier manner and actually increase their yields because we're running into a lot of farmers with issues where they can't control whatever pest is attacking their plants because of resistance. So all of this is bringing us back to what nature intended us to do.
And this slide is, assuming that everyone here understands the value of the bay, but um, coral restoration is dependent on, the seagrass because that's where the juvenile fish are coming from. And the seagrass is dependent on the mangroves because that's where the little baby fish are. And the mangroves are dependent on, the streams of flow from coming from the Everglades and the farmers. So it's like, it's all connected, it's all a cycle, upstream, upstream, upstream. If you do coral restoration without seagrass restoration or mangrove restoration or supporting farmers, it's kind of like building a tower in the park. And it's an isolated uh incident. So we gotta do it all at one time. So if you go to Amazon right now and you look up worm tea, it's like $40 a gallon, right? So this is our biggest gift to our regional economy. If you're not in the Everglades watershed, we're not going to sell it to you at a discounted rate. We're going to sell it to you for $40 a gallon to help fund our program. But if you are local, if you are a farmer within our region, within the Everglades watershed, we're going to sell you that worm tea for the exact same price that you would buy some Agent Orange derivative from Monsanto. So that way we make sustainable organic farming competitive locally, regionally. So how do we keep tabs on everything? I'll fly through this quickly, but how do we get our data? A lot of it's weight based. And with the weight, we can get all of these metrics pretty quickly. The costs on how much the municipality would save on landfill fees, the amount of greenhouse gas emitted, and then what you just saw with the pesticide and fertilizer mitigation, things like that. And if we dig in a little deeper, we can do things like this one's my favorite, the soil cache and exchange capacity. That's like how how does soil help with storm surge? How does soil help with hurricane um, you know, mitigation or impact mitigation? Like how does soil help make Miami more resilient to storm surge? And then biodiversity index is my absolute favorite, which is basically how much life exists in the soil. And this is just a look how the reporting looks. Probably should have taken that out. So our financial sustainability, we need to make this survive beyond 2 years. So we need to look at what's worked in the past and what's happening locally and support that and be a part of it and help create financial models that live beyond 2 years to expand and build our program, which leads us to our call to action. These are our calls to action. We need help and support with our charrette, which maybe we could even align directly, potentially. And then, but we do want to have it in the Village of Pinecrest at the Pinecrest Gardens. Our grant officially starts in June, so we have time. And then, how are we going to integrate our plan more directly with the plan that this group has put together? We need help with municipal introductions. So again, we are grassrootsing this, which means municipality to municipality to municipality. Um, like the smaller ones, even smaller than a municipality is things called like CRAs, community redevelopment or act business or I mean areas, if you will, and then business improvement districts. I need help with planning research, which is basically going looking at each comprehensive plan, recycling plans, etc., and finding parallels. We have gardening events. What is it? Once a month or once a week at the Fertile Earth Farm, where we can connect with other gardening nonprofits and get your hands dirty and have fun supporting and growing organic foods. And then I need a storyteller to work with me. We are changing the way an entire region looks at waste, and everything right now is really hot. So I can only film so much. But if there's anyone who's passionate about this and can show up at these commission events, that can show up at all these different meetings and just help me record, capture, and then organize all that content, we're going to put together a story about the Everglades Earth Cycle and how together we, um, you know, started a movement. And that's our ask. I don't have Lanette's info up here, but this is mine. Please scan here for Love the Everglades. And if you have an interest or just something that pops up that you're good at or could contribute with, please scan there and fill out the little form. You don't have to fill out everything. There's a lot in there. Just fill out, little bits here and there. And that's everything. I'm done. Lanette, do you have anything to wrap up with?
Awesome. I will put my contact info in the chat for whoever's interested, and we welcome any questions you guys might have.